Thank you, everybody, for joining us. This is the Bond Accountability and Performance Audit Year 3 Work Plan discussion for Portland Public Schools. We are, I believe, Terry's on board. He's helping us today with the live stream portion of this in the public setting. And Brooke Bashone is also joining us. She's one of my construction project managers, and she's helping with note-taking and a couple other things today. So with that, I figured we start off with a couple of introductions so kind of everybody knows who everybody is. I was just going to call people's names out and let you introduce yourselves, and I'll go through and make sure we get everybody, and we'll go from there. So with that, Leanne, you want to start?
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Leanne Liu, and I'm with Shobha Gavashan Consulting.
Kathy?
Kathy Brady with Shobha Gavashan Consulting.
Tenzin, you're next.
Hi, Tenzin Gonta. I'm with the BAC, at least for the next month, and then my term actually ends this calendar year, but I'm happy to be here.
Okay. Norm?
Hi, Norm Dowdy with the BAC, and I will be continuing on.
Okay. And in the background behind the curtain is also Derek Henderson. He's our department admin and resident guru of PPS processes. So say hi, Derek.
Hello, everyone.
Okay. With that, Leanne, I think I'll hand it over to you guys to kind of walk us through the Year 3 work plan, and then the kind of run of show today for everybody is we'll do the quick presentation and then open it up for Q&A, and we'll go from there. So, Leanne?
So instead of Leanne, I'm actually going to start off first, Scott, if you mind. Again, Kathy Brady, and we're happy to be here today to talk about the Year 3 performance audit for the bond. Before we get into the details, or Leanne gets into the details of the scope, we just thought for the benefit of the new subcommittee members, we would give a little background about our firm. We were hired by PPS a couple years ago in October of 2018 to conduct these annual performance audits for the 2017 bond and its projects for at least a 4-year cycle. So this is Year 3, and we have issued 3 reports thus far. The first year had 2 reports. Our firm, Shobha Gavashan Consulting, a mouthful, we were founded more than 20 years ago by the state auditor in California and his chief deputy. So the state auditor's office is similar to your Secretary of State and the types of audits that your Secretary of State perform. And at our time at the State Auditor's Office, as well as with Shobha Gavashan Consulting, we've conducted many audits in the education industry, K through 12, school districts, community colleges, universities, campuses, departments of education. But we also do other government sectors, not just education. The audits we've done covered a variety of topics. And what we've gathered is a lot of extensive experience with audits of capital infrastructure and construction improvement projects. Many of those that are bond funded or sales tax funded. So we really specialize only in audits of the public sector and really just Western US. We try not to go too far out of too many time zones. Although we could. We are headquartered in Sacramento, California, but we do have a local presence in the Vancouver, Portland area as well. The other thing I wanted to briefly touch upon are the types of standards that our audits follow. It's called GAGAS, Generally Accepted Government Auditing Standards, fondly referred to auditors as the Yellow Book because it has a yellow cover. Following these audit standards really is so crucial for what we do. They provide just an essential accountability and transparency to public programs and provide a great framework to ensure integrity and objectivity and quality from an audit. The Yellow Book requires a lot of different things. Provisions on us auditors to be independent, to adhere to ethical principles. There are continuing professional education requirements that we have to obtain. And we have to follow many different provisions for adequately planning and supervising audits. We have to ensure our results are based on sufficient and appropriate evidence. And to us, we really think that's one of the most important pieces, especially from the auditee standpoint. And that's because our conclusions have to be based on evidence, We have to have data and testing, observations, analyses. They can't just be on our unsupported opinion or hearsay. We have to document our results. The Yellow Book also has requirements related to reporting, and it's important as well from an auditee's perspective, because as auditors, we have to obtain and incorporate the views of responsible officials into our report. We do that a couple different ways. Definitely once the report's in writing, we ask for a written response back from PPS, but we also get their perspective along the way through briefings and try to incorporate that into the report as well. One last point about standards that I like to point out is that us auditors also have to be audited. Maybe that's so that we understand how an auditees feel. But we have to undergo a peer review process every 3 years where independent auditors come into our firm, review our work, our reports, our processes, and ensure that we're following the GAGA standards. And
Kathy, can I interrupt just for a second? This is Kevin. I just wanted to let you know that I joined. Apologies. I've got you on my phone. That's the only way I could get in.
Oh, yes, no worries. We're glad you're here.
Thank you.
So yeah, just talking about the auditing standards, they're really pretty seamless in the background to what we do. It's not, the BAC or PPS doesn't necessarily see those. They live with it in terms of all of our evidence and our documentation and reports. But that's basically the standards that we follow. If there's no questions about those, we use the standards as a framework in the PPS bond audit. So what we do on an annual basis to develop our scope is we do some interviewing with the PPS executive leadership, OSM management. We may talk to stakeholders, the BAC, project managers, to really understand the environment at that time, concerns, challenges, project status, and identify some potential risk areas. We might look through some preliminary information, especially since we have access from the previous audits to eBuilder, which is where OSM keeps their project files. So we might look at meeting notes or some documents, even maybe board meeting minutes, status of prior audit issues to help inform what the scope will be for that particular year. At the same time, we're looking at potential project complexity, maybe a financial constraint, an unresolved audit issue, and really where our project is in its particular phase. If it's not in construction, it doesn't make sense for us to look at construction management. Maybe we look at something in design. Also, having it be year 3, we're looking at areas we haven't potentially looked at before. So that's generally what we do. We draft up an initial work plan, and then we meet with OSM to refine, add to it, modify that audit focus before we finalize the plan to begin the audit. They are living documents, so they can change as we get into field work and we see something that may not be as valuable to look at, or we might come across something that requires much more attention, and then we would modify things at that time with discussions with OSM and everyone. So why don't we turn it over to Leanne, and she can walk you through the details of year 3 audit scope.
Thank you, Kathy. Before we get into details, I just wanted to say that I'm really glad we were able to fit in this meeting before Kevin, Tenzin, and Tom are leaving the committee at the end of this year, in a couple of weeks, actually. So, your input and insight have been extremely valuable. And even though you will not be part of the BAC anymore, I'm certain the team will continue to hear your voices and we'll keep asking ourselves, what would Kevin, Tenzin, and Tom say to make sure our report is clear, concise, and provides value to the bond program. That said, we do absolutely look forward to working with the new members, Beth, Norm, and whoever else will be joining the committee. So to hear, new perspectives on the bond program. So with that, these are the 4 areas that we are working on in year 3. What I will be sharing with you today are what we call big questions that help us focus our work. because it is definitely easy to get lost in details, especially with a program that is this large. So we wanted to make sure we keep our eyes on the prize and work towards answering these key questions as we're going through all of our analyses. So for the first area, bond communication, outreach, and transparency, this sort of evolved from a recommendation we had in year two, in our year two report about how OSM can better summarize and present to the public all their bond accomplishments. But what is key to us this time is really to look into how consistent and reliable the information is that is put out there by OSM or any other PPS departments. The second area is this equity in public purchasing and contracting, or Eppc. It is a very timely topic and relates to a directive that the board adopted in 2012. The administrative directive was issued in 2013. So the intent here is really to see if PPS's processes could be improved to possibly be more successful in meeting the district's 80% aspirational goal for MWSBE participation. So since this could be an entire audit in itself, and we are working with limited resources and not much time, frankly, the focus is really on the business equity aspect of the policy as it relates to the capital school projects and does not include a review of contractor workforce or career learning equity. I just wanted to make sure that I emphasize that limit in our scope. For both of these areas, we will be looking at comparable entities as well to see if there are any differences or practices elsewhere that PPS could benefit from adopting moving forward. The last two areas, bond status and prior audit recommendations, were topics we covered in the last audit as well. They do have a smaller focus this time, but nonetheless, they are important for the public to know where the 2017 bond stands in terms of overall cost and schedule, especially with Kellogg and Madison High Schools opening next year, and just recently passed 2020 bond providing funding for completing Benson High School. And then lastly, for prior audit recommendation, it is important for us to validate any progress made by OSM and PPS towards addressing the recommendations from our audit work as well as the 2012 bond audit recommendations. So very short, but this is really all that we have on our end in terms of our year 3 audit work. The last slide I have is just providing a time frame for getting all of that work done. And so backing into having a report ready for the public around mid-June, we are looking at wrapping up any in-depth analyses mid-March so that we can share with you and OSM a non-public draft report mid-April. We will be sitting down with you to go through the draft report at what we call an exit conference to get your perspective on anything that we have developed in that report. There will also be a separate exit OSM before the report is finalized in early June. Just a note, though, that a June report ready for public milestone. In past years, the report became public when it was presented either to the board or the PAC, which sometimes was in August or later. But really, we will be wrapped up with all our work before the fiscal year end, hopefully. So with that, Kathy and I are happy to answer any questions you may have.
Leanne, I have a couple of questions. This is Kevin.
Yes.
On the business equity, well, I guess there's a threshold question. You know, we're having this meeting pretty late in the process for reasons that we know about. How are you on schedule? I assume you started field work. Is it going well? Is it on schedule? Are you going to do you see any problems in meeting your schedule?
So we, similar to last year, we started later in the process than we anticipated. Instead of a July start, we started at the end of October, really. We've barely wrapped up what we call the reconnaissance phase, just trying to get a lay of the land. We're starting some initial, more in-depth interviews, requesting information and whatnot as part of our field work. Right now, we are still hopeful that we will be able to meet the at least the June report final deadline. We may be looking at shifting interim milestones a little bit, so like a April, mid-April draft report may be able to push it out a little bit. Just depends. We barely started, like I said, and we're really trying to, like in prior years, adhere to the schedules that were set forth for us by OSM. But given the circumstances with especially the business equity piece, where we will be talking to contractors and architects, stakeholders, and whatnot, it just depends on their availability too. And doing everything remotely might be another challenge, but we're hopeful.
Okay. On the business equity piece that you're working on, there's been a lot of focus recently, you may or may not be aware of, on the performance of the contractors, and obviously that's where most of the money is. But we haven't had much focus on consultants, and they kind of, at least on a couple of projects, consistently, at least on the summaries we get, are falling short. So are they included in your analysis, or are you focused primarily on contractors as well?
Our initial focus was on construction contractors for the 4 big projects that are going on right now. As we are going through the details and the numbers and percentages, looking at the makeup of that, where goals are being more met than in other areas, we may expand it. So that's as part of our reconnaissance and field work. We may look into if, like you said, the A&E contracts are always under as well. We'll probably will expand it to include not just construction contractors, general contractors, but also professional services or A&E contracts. So we have now closed the door on that, if you will.
Okay. I don't think we've seen numbers for consultants, but on the balance scorecard, on a couple of those projects, they're consistently running short. Mm-hmm. So I think some level of scrutiny there would be important. On the 2017 bond status, what effective date you're going to be reporting that the bond is doing well or not well or whatever, but effective what date, given where we are in the process?
So in the past, our sort of cutoff date was December 31st of the year that we were looking at. So it would have been December 31st, 2020. But because there has been some recent movement with Madison, a possible name change, and the items that are going on there, and Benson just finished design development, we're looking probably at more of a end of January cutoff date. So we're going to be a little bit more current in terms of the data that we have for the status. But, in past years too, we're trying to push it as far into the end of our field work as possible in terms of status and consider any subsequent events. So because we know our report's not going to be done until June, but we do need to cut it off at some point. We can't keep looking at data. So we're thinking right now end of January, and then if there's any major events that occur before the report's finalized, we'll see how we can incorporate that or comment on that or or disclose that we did not look at it.
Yeah, okay.
Kevin?
Yes.
The alignment with the end of January also works really well with typically we've always done December because it also aligned with the data sets that were pulled for the January BAC update to try to continually align the SEC report with a known public financial report out to the BAC, so it's the same data set. So it also aligns well this year in that we're doing, as I understand it from Marina, the plan is to do a BAC retreat in January, I believe, for the reporting formats, with a February full BAC report. So the end of January financial reports for BAC will also be the same data sets for the SEC analysis. So that we get a type of data comparable rather than your report being out of sync with SEC's data pool, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thanks, Scott.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. As part of your analysis, are you going to be looking at the sufficiency of contingencies on the project contingencies, as well as the program contingency?
For the 2017 bond
Yes.
status, we'll look at the overall bond program for sure, where they are at in terms of expenditures versus budgets, and what's left and how much's left for whatever projects that need to be done. So it's going to be similar to last two prior audit reports at this point, at least. That's what we're envisioning in terms of the follow-up on that, or that section, I should say. How deep we'll dive into that, if there's obvious concerns with contingencies, we'll have to see how far we go into that. And I see Beth just joined us as well. Welcome.
Just to follow up on the contingency issue, I think the reason I raised the question is that there's some, as you know, we're reviewing the whole reporting mechanism between OSM and BAC and the board. And there's at least some level of interest that's been expressed in really having the BAC focus on the status of those contingencies as an indicator of are we doing well, are we on track, or are we not on track? So for what that's worth, just so you know that.
Okay.
I had a couple of questions. The first was, you folks were kind enough to send a work plan a few months back. I just wanted to see if any of that has changed since we last interacted about the year 3 work. The first part was about the public communication, outreach, and transparency, that first scope. I'm just wondering if the scope and time frame for that, I think we asked about whether communication and outreach and transparency around the 2020 bond development would be included with that or not. Can you?
We're not touching the 2020 bond development for this round. So the version that you have seen is the version that we're working off right now.
Okay. And then with the business equity piece, I think there's been conversations over the years about how sometimes because of market conditions, it's really challenging to meet equity goals. And if the focus is on the 4 big projects that are currently under construction, I'm wondering if there's going to be some trend information or something that you could provide to just kind of let us know how the district is doing in terms of kind of history. Because I think that when I first joined, it seemed like the district was able to meet its overall goals more easily than it has been more recently. So I think that would be helpful context for the BAC and the board.
Right. And, even though the main focus is the 4 capital school construction projects, we're also looking at health and safety too, and trying to get an idea of, where there might be challenges, because the number that is reported is an overall number, and there might be some aspects of the program that are doing, that is doing better than others. So without having, done a whole lot of work yet and having the numbers in front of us, we're trying to slice and dice and get trends as much as we can. And so that we can see, making sure that the numbers that are reported are valid and there's no, gaps or any information that is incorrect. We want to make sure we have that all in front of us before we can draw any conclusions or where we want to dive in deep. But I do envision us having some sort of stats and trends, whether it is overall, by trade, by MWSEB type. We're not sure yet, but we're just barely got the B2G data, and we're trying to get to the bottom of that.
Great. That answers my other question, which was whether health and safety was within the scope of your review too. So thank you.
Yes, because we didn't want to just look at the big contracts and then leave out the small ones. And health and safety, some of them are sizable. The consolidated projects are ones that we are looking at. For the other ones that are a little bit smaller, we'll have to see based on what the participations numbers show. But yes, it's not completely excluded.
Excuse me, to follow up on that a little bit, one of the issues we've had about the business equity is the reporting criterion, which has been from the outset has been based on the amounts paid, as opposed to contracts issued or contracts committed. And I understand why the amounts paid are important, because at least in the industry, there's some history of contracts being reported as being substantial, and then something happens and those payments aren't ultimately made. So we understand that. However, it doesn't give us a very good overall view of the status. For instance, Madison was seemingly trending just fine after a year into the contract, and then we were suddenly told that, oh my God, we've contracted all the work, or most of all the work, and we actually are going to be more like 11% or 12%. But we had no way of knowing that based on the data, because as it turns out, I guess some of the early trades were fine, but maybe some of the later trades were not, or are not going to be. So are you going to look at that issue?
We'll definitely try to look at ways that PPS can possibly improve the reporting and how they're capturing it, at what point in time they're capturing the data, and also looking at other entities, school districts or others that have a similar requirement or program, I should say, to see what they are doing. Like you said, it seems to be fairly common where entities are capturing the goal based on payments made. Some built it into the contract, and it's going to be based on the contract amount. But we'll look at what best practices, if you will, or comparables, I guess, are out there, and to the extent possible, find out from these other entities what worked well and what did not work well. And we listened into some of the prior board meetings as well, and there seems to be some progress or initiatives on the way for like Benson, and they're doing this procurement plan that is a little bit different, and possibly innovative. So we want to explore everything that's out there and hopefully be able to provide a range of recommendation or whatnot, or at least tell PPS what's out there and what can be or should be considered.
Okay.
I think a follow-up question to that, and maybe this might be an area that Scott might be able to add some context to, is I thought that there was a kind of regional consortium around contracting equity. And if you're looking at comparing the district with other jurisdictions, with other kind of government entities in the area. And I don't know if PPS, I thought PPS was involved initially. I don't know what the status of that work is right now, but that might be a resource for the audit team.
Yeah, there was an owners discussion group amongst many of the larger owners here in the local contracting area, and that was being tenured by CMAA. Tom, I can't remember who took that over. Was it Steve Ball from PGE? I need to reach in and see. I haven't heard anything about when those meetings are occurring, Tenzin. So it's definitely something that we want to try to stay connected to, because, like you said, that allows us to stay connected with our counterparts at Multnomah County or Clackamas County or these other agencies, OHSU, the port, for comparables. Definitely.
Yeah, and I thought the Metro Regional Government was taking a coordinator role in that too, at least a couple of years ago. So they might be another.
Okay. Yeah, I can definitely circle back with Marina and Emily and Paul about how can we, take a look at that and find those connections. I think Paul's doing quite a bit since he kind of heads up the B2G compliance and in that element.
This is Norm. On this topic, I was just curious if the audit team has experience on auditing this particular topic for other clients. It's really kind of a surprisingly complex and dynamic topic, with the constrained capacity in the market and kind of the changing capacity and issues like that.
We've done some work with it on San Francisco. Has got a very robust equity program, somewhat similar, more mandatory, really, not just the voluntary. So we're going to try to draw some comparisons against that as well on sort of the pros and cons, or the challenges and risks with having a mandatory program versus, an aspirational goal.
This is Tom speaking for the port. Most of that was, at least at the port, was we would work directly with our small business coordinator and make sure our not unlike what the school district is doing. But I don't think we ever audited how we were doing with our business equity and purchasing contracting, other than we did a just a study,
disparity study.
Yes, which then allowed us to set goals and things like that. So they weren't just aspirational goals; they were hard goals based on, because we had done the study.
Kind of tied to that aspirational goals approach to things, I think one question that I had was how does PPS hold its contractors accountable to those goals? I know I think with workforce there's liquidated damages provisions or things that could be used, but with mixed success. So I'm just wondering if what PPS has been using, and then also if there's any comparison to other jurisdictions, what strategies they could be employing to help kind of make sure that we're getting what our public dollars are we're planning, what we'd like to get out of our public dollars.
Yeah, I think that the challenge with that one, Tenzin, is that my understanding is that if we want to make any kind of, there's any sort of legal consequences, the disparity study starts to become highly important in it and establishing the baseline of what's reasonable. And so
Correct.
I could definitely check with Emily and Marina and back all the way to legal counsel about what we can do there. We just got to be careful of, particularly within the contracting rules, and how the public, either whether it's the ORS is in the 279C section or it's Portland Public Procurement Rule, and then the aspirational goals of the district and how the policy is written. And there's a lot wrapped up with that, and we're just trying to be really careful that we don't put the district in a position that's pretty untenable about kind of where there's no good outcome, if that makes sense. So, but I'll definitely check with Marina about what we can be doing there.
So I guess,
And
Scott, does that mean there's not a current disparity study that would be that PPS is using right now to inform its policies?
I do not believe that district has completed a disparity study. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, that's been my understanding is the district hasn't done one. I mean, now would be a good time to do it because they have a much, we've got 8 years of contracting history and large programs that they didn't have leading up to the bond program. But they're expensive and they take a lot of time. One thought I had that we used as well is we had in some of our earlier contracts. I'm not sure if they're continuing to do those because I'm not there anymore. But we used to have incentive programs written into our contracts that would incent the contractors. There are more behavior incentives than hard dollars and hard goal incentives. But we would structure the incentives to cover a variety of different things, like how are you doing on schedule, or how are you doing on budget, or how are you doing on small business, or whatever it is we wanted to set. And then we would have predetermined times when we would do an assessment, and then the contractor would make their assessment of how they're doing, and then we as an owner would do an assessment. And then based on that, there was a pool of money and a little bit of fee at risk that would then be allocated to them at various points throughout the contract. And the idea was it would incent the kind of behavior, and we would weight things differently. What we thought was important that they should focus on. So that's another option they could do, but without pointing, if you didn't set up track right from the get-go with this incentive program, and then you got to kind of agree to how it works and so forth. But that's another way you can do it without having hard dollars or anything at stake, and you're not up against a disparity study or other reasons why you can't, you can't penalize them. You use the reverse approach where you incent them. It's another idea, but it's too late for the contracts.
There's one other aspect I think that is worth looking at. I think starting with Grant High School, the RFP, there was a strong encouragement in the RFP for the prime contractor to joint venture with a minority-owned business, and that's one. I assume that's still in the contracts or in the RFPs. But as a result of that, that actually happened on Grant High School and happened again on Lincoln High School. So I think it's worth a look at that aspect of the program, and how I'm not clear, frankly, on how the minority participation in a joint venture is scored, if you like, in getting up to the 18%, because I think there are different ways of doing that. So looking at that aspect, I think would be worthwhile. And just in general, is that a positive move in the equity program?
Yeah, there's been a lot of effort on the district's part about trying to support the diversity goals, and we've seen an evolution all the way back from where we started with Roosevelt back in 2012 to what the approach has been, and we're undertaking currently at Benson. So all the way down to the sub packaging and the district working with the CMGCs about, okay, how is the sub packaging looking? Are you simply partnering with a major firm as a joint venture who's a certified firm, or what does that look like in those efforts to continue to drive the aspirational goals higher, if that makes sense? And so I know the Benson efforts are to date even more innovative than what we've tried on Lincoln or Madison.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And I would say, yeah,
certainly positive.
Yeah.
I think what we have, though,
and I guess just,
we've had shortfalls on Franklin and Madison, seemingly on Madison, and successes on other projects. So, what's the difference, if you like?
And I might just chime in again, and I'm sorry I called in late, so I missed half it. The CMGC contract, by the very nature, offer way more opportunities than the hard-bid work. So I guess I'd want to make sure that there's that distinction. Without having a disparity study, you're not going to do very well on the hard-bid work because you can't set hard goals. Your real success is on your negotiated work, where you can influence the contract, the RFP selection process, possible other things to encourage the greater participation. You're pretty limited on the hard bid work. Just as a point of clarification, you're not, unless you have a disparity study, you're not going to be able to do much better than you're doing. And then I was going to point out that I believe Portland Community College, back during their big program, did a lot of that, where they had partnerships with the generals and minority contractors. So you may want to pick their brains a little bit and how successful that worked when they did their program. I don't know if you know the context over there, but I'm trying to remember her name. Linda Degman, and I think is her name. And Krista Phillips.
Actually, yeah. They were actually doing audits over at PCC, so it'll be very easy to pick their brains.
Oh, good. There you go.
So we have it's just a time check. We got about 10 minutes left. So other questions from the BAC?
Yes, I have a question, Scott. Let's see. And I apologize for coming in late. I had a chance to enable my daughter-in-law to get one of the first vaccines, and I couldn't say no to that. So I got here as soon as I could. And she got her vaccination. I'm wondering in this discussion, and I'm glad I got here for this part, I'm wondering if it's worth taking a look at what kinds of work, those percentages we're seeing, what kinds of work is being done by minority contractors. Because it's been my impression in the contracts I've looked at since this became an issue, and granted, back when I was working in construction, it wasn't as much of an issue, but sometimes it's only the same kinds of work that white contractors are giving to minority contractors, and maybe there could be an incentive for providing different kinds of work than is generally, like, flagging, for example, is one that typically they're going to try to find. They're going to, try to find those things that are easy to hire in for. But maybe that just what work is being done could be something to look at in order to try to increase the variety of work and to provide more capability within the minority workforce, because after all, that should be the goal. Is we would like to see more owners, and not have the owners be, all non-BIPOC owners. If that makes sense.
Very much.
Along a similar line, how are the percentages calculated? I know at one point in time they were taking out trades that there was no participation available in, like pile driving or heavy structural concrete, things like that. I'm just curious how it's calculated now, if it's just straight percentage on all the work, or if they're pulling out the certain trades there are no capacity in, especially on the bigger projects.
I think all I can say is those are all really great questions, and we are looking into trying to get to the bottom of all of those. We're designing our work to address these questions. So as soon as we have answers or have something more that we can share in to the BAC, we will. And there's some things that we will have to figure out how that format will look. But we do have we started to design our work to address almost all of the questions that you had. So hopefully it will come through in the report that you see, and hopefully we'll be able to share some of the information beforehand.
Yeah, one of the things I'd like to point out is that we, as Leanne pointed out earlier on, this one particular topic could be an extensive audit that we could conduct for an extensive period of time beyond what we have available for field work. I mean, we could be spending easily 12 to 18 months doing a deep dive on this. And so one of the things we will be working on is with Marina and Emily is trying to figure out how do we maximize the audit and the scope of the audit in this area to be able to dive into the issues and get the most relevant feedback for OSM and the district to take action on. Like I said, let me check with Marina and see what we can do to try to wrap our hands around all these different aspects. You guys are raising a lot of great questions, and my head's kind of spinning a little bit about how do we start to look at the going through all of the information, right? And so that we don't end up where we're in June or July and we're still trying to go through all the data and not being able to get you guys at least some of the answers you're looking at. It could be that it is a continuation on. Remember, we have a year 4 audit that we have to think about in scoping, and Marina and I will be talking about what do we do about the 2020 audit or the 2020 bond, and all those efforts as well. So I think this is a topic that is going to continue to be in the work plan for a while now.
As long as it's not like a phase 1, phase 2, and 2 reports in 1 year, Scott, we're fine with that.
That
was one reason why we're struggling a little bit in terms of resources for year 3 and 4. So, but we're trying to assess. I think we heard all of your concerns, and they're churning in the back of our heads, and I think we'll be able to work through all of those questions. Like I said, it is going to be challenging because the scope could explode. We're reaching out to contractor, minority communities, stakeholder groups. There's going to be surveys that go out and trying to, figure out what type of work they're doing, how much work they've got, what they're, how did they learn about the work? Is it a direct appointment? Are they going through a GC, or however? We're trying to explore all avenues, and then hopefully be able to pull it together somehow for a concise report in plain English for everybody to understand. Tenzin, I remember your words too. And then hopefully, by the time we get into the new year, we'll have these conversations in person, perhaps, and we can sit down around the table and go through things more informally too.
Other questions from members?
I think in that old work plan, there was also a task to interview Beth and Norm. So I just wanted to see if you still plan on connecting with them at some point.
They are part of the stakeholder groups. We're reaching out to board members, BAC members, and it seems like the whole community that we want to talk to. So yes, there will be. And whoever the new, audit subcommittee members will be that are joining in the new year, we'll definitely reach out to everybody who wants to talk to us. It's more often that we're reaching out and no one wants to talk to us, but certainly will.
Okay, we have about 5 minutes left. Other questions?
Looks like you've exhausted us, Scott.
I just want to make sure we get all the questions on the table, Kevin. That's all.
Yeah, no, I know you do. I know you do.
Oh.
Leanne and Kathy, it's been a pleasure working with you. I'm glad that you guys are on board. I think you've done very, very professional work, and I'm sure you're going to continue to do that. So, and I'm totally confident in Beth and Norm carrying the torch from here on, and I think you're going to find them knowledgeable and very helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you too. You've provided really great insights.
I would agree. They've enjoyed working with both as well.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you. We will, but we look forward to the new members as well. And all of your thoughts go in our head when we're doing our work and try to think of the questions you might have. And I think it makes the work better.
And also while we're giving kudos, a lot of kudos to PPS, especially under Scott's leadership for making sure those audit recommendations get implemented. I think we're going to see another, great positive status kind of update at the end of this audit process.
Yeah, Grace has already, just going back to your question kind of early on, Kevin, Grace has already got me 19 RFIs I have to respond to, and she's only been at it for a little while. So yeah, they're keeping me busy.
Yeah, very good. And I ditto Tenzin's remarks there. You've been leading this charge, and it's the results show in that. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well then with that, unless there's last remarks, I will wrap up this public meeting, and we'll let you all get back to your evenings.
Very good. Happy holidays,
you.
everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Happy holidays,
everyone.
everybody.
Same to you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.